Welcome back to the Deep Dive Learner. Okay, let's unpack this today because
What a big one.
a massive one.
Right.
What does it actually take to build a multi-billion-dollar financial empire, uh, lose your freedom entirely, and then walk out the other side of a federal prison sentence with a, completely new perspective on life?
It really sounds like a movie script.
Right. It feels like it belongs in a Hollywood screenplay. But today, we are diving into a reality that is far more complex, much messier, and frankly, a lot more fascinating than fiction.
Yeah, it's a journey that completely shatters almost every conventional Silicon Valley startup narrative you've ever heard.
Exactly.
We aren't talking about, a kid dropping out of Stanford with a perfect master plan. We're talking about an incredibly nonlinear path.
And the mission of this deep dive is to trace that exact zigzagging journey. Our source material today is this remarkably revealing feature-length interview from the All In podcast. It features CZ.
Changpeng Zhao?
Yes, Changpeng Zhao, the founder and former CEO of Binance. And we're going to follow his path from literally flipping burgers on a McDonald's grill in Canada.
All the way to landing on the cover of Forbes.
Yeah, and then navigating a truly harrowing legal battle with the U.S. government, and finally walking away with a presidential pardon.
Which is just a wild arc. And we want to extract the universal lessons on resilience here, look at the stark realities of extreme wealth, and examine this very provocative thesis he has about the future of artificial intelligence.
So to give you, the learner, a sense of the terrain we're covering today, what's a roadmap?
Well, we're going to start by looking at his early life, specifically how his immigrant experience forged this intense, almost obsessive optimization mindset.
Right.
Then we'll explore his discovery of Bitcoin, the incredibly chaotic founding of Binance, the intense rivalry he had with FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried.
That part is crazy.
It really is. And then the nuances of his legal battle, and finally his new chapters in global education.
Because you might look at a billionaire founder and think their path was a straight line of pure genius, right? That they had some grand vision mapped out on a whiteboard at age 20 and just executed it flawlessly.
Which is almost never the case.
It's mostly a grind. It's a messy grind of pivots, luck, and this uncanny ability to stay completely calm when everything is falling apart. So let's go right back to the foundation.
Let's do it.
We are starting in 1989. CZ's family immigrates from China to Vancouver, Canada. And this is right around the time of the Tiananmen Square protests. The timing of this move it's wild.
The sheer serendipity is staggering, honestly. In the interview, CZ notes that his family had actually started applying for their passports back in 1985.
Oh, wow. 4 years earlier.
Yeah, we have to remember the context of that era. Back then, it took years just to get a Chinese passport approved, and then several more years of bureaucratic waiting to secure a visa to actually leave the country.
So it was a massive waiting game.
A huge waiting game. They managed to get their passports just before the events of 1989. And interestingly, while getting new passports became incredibly difficult after Tiananmen, securing a visa actually became slightly easier for those who already had their documents in hand.
That's a tiny window.
It was this incredibly fortunate window of geopolitics that allowed his family to finally reunite in British Columbia.
I want to focus on what happens when they actually arrive in Canada, though, because the contrast in their living situation is just a massive reset.
It's night and day.
Back in China, his father was a respected university professor. His mother was a math and history teacher. They had real status in their community.
Right.
But when they touched down in Vancouver, the reality of the immigrant experience hits hard. His father takes a position as an assistant professor at the University of British Columbia. But according to CZ, he's living on a stipend of about 1,000 Canadian dollars a month.
Which is not much, especially for a family.
Not at all. They're living in very basic, low-cost faculty housing on campus.
And his mother's transition is even more severe.
Yeah. By the third day of their arrival in Canada, this former math and history teacher goes to work in a minimum wage sewing factory.
Third day.
Third day. She spent the next 7 to 10 years sewing clothes because she simply didn't speak enough English to get a job at a previous professional level.
Think about what that does to a family's status and their financial baseline.
It is a profound, grounding reset for everyone.
And it directly sets the stage for CZ getting his first job at age 14. He actually applies on his 14th birthday.
Which I think was the legal minimum age to work there at the time?
Yeah, I think so. And a week later, he's flipping burgers at McDonald's. But he notes a specific detail about his pay that I found fascinating. The minimum wage in British Columbia at the time was $6 an hour.
Okay.
But McDonald's had some sort of youth exemption loophole, so he was only making $4.50 an hour.
Wow.
That was his foundational income,
Yeah.
$4.50 an hour. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's crucial to understand this psychological makeup. He wasn't some precocious tech wonder kid coding in a basement 24/7.
Dreaming of disrupting the financial system.
Right. He describes himself during this period as just a normal immigrant kid adapting to Canada, making friends, playing volleyball, just generally being a happy person.
Yeah.
When your family has gone from being esteemed academics to living on a tiny stipend and working in a sewing factory.
And your first taste of financial independence is making sub-minimum wage smelling like French fries.
Exactly. It fundamentally strips away any sense of entitlement.
It sets the floor. Like, if you know you can survive and be perfectly happy flipping burgers for pocket change, the fear of failure later in life just doesn't have the same bite.
He developed a remarkably stable internal baseline. He learned to be content and adaptable long before he ever saw real wealth. And that pragmatism carries right into his college years. He originally goes to McGill University to study biology.
And his reason for choosing biology is so practical, it's almost funny.
What was it?
He didn't have some burning passion for dissecting frogs or anything.
Oh.
A friend's mom, someone he respected, told him that doctors have a good, stable lifestyle. That was it.
The ultimate pragmatic choice.
But after just one semester, he realizes biology requires way too much memorization and isn't for him. So he pivots to computer science. And his main goal is to graduate with 0 student debt.
Which he achieves through an incredibly robust co-op program and summer jobs.
Right.
Aside from a small amount of financial help from his father and sister in the first 2 years, he completely funds his own education.
That's impressive.
It is. And this drive for self-sufficiency leads him to take an internship in Tokyo during his 3rd year. He's working for an American financial tech company called Fusion Systems.
Imagine being a college student landing in Tokyo in the late 90s or early 2000s. He describes it as feeling like stepping into a sci-fi future.
I can only imagine.
Initially, he's supposed to work on medical digital imaging storage, like an early photo database app for medical scans. But very quickly, he gets pulled into the company's main, highly lucrative product.
Which was?
Order execution software for the Tokyo Stock Exchange.
This is perhaps the most pivotal technical moment of his early life.
Why is that?
Because it introduces him to the ruthless world of high-frequency trading software. In this environment, you aren't just writing code to make an app look pretty.
Right.
You are operating in a space where every single microsecond translates to vast amounts of money won or lost.
I want to pause here for a second because, words like latency and high-frequency trading get thrown around a lot. For those of us who aren't software engineers, what does this actually look like under the hood? Why is it so difficult to build?
Okay, let's break it down. When you hit buy on a stock, that order has to travel from your computer to your broker to the exchange, match with the seller, and confirm the trade.
Makes sense.
In high-frequency trading, firms use algorithms to do this thousands of times a second to capture tiny price differences. So the software executing these trades has to be unimaginably fast. CZ explains in the interview that to make the software efficient enough, they had to strip out all the standard database lookups.
Meaning they couldn't just save data to a hard drive and look it up later.
Right. Accessing a hard drive, even a fast one, takes milliseconds. That is way too slow. You have to do everything in memory, meaning all the matching logic happens in the computer's active RAM.
Wow.
Furthermore, you have to simplify all the pre-trade risk checks to reduce computational drag. But CZ goes even deeper. He talks about moving optimization down from the software level to the actual hardware level, utilizing something called FPGA, Field Programmable Gate Arrays.
Okay, you're going to have to translate that for me. What is an FPGA and why does a coder care about it?
An FPGA is essentially a specialized microchip that you can custom program to do one specific task incredibly fast. Usually when data comes into a computer through a network cable, it hits the network card, travels up the motherboard into the central processor.
The CPU.
Right, the CPU. It gets processed by the software and then travels all the way back down.
Which takes time.
Exactly. By putting an FPGA chip right on the Ethernet card itself, you can program the logic right at the entry point. The data doesn't even have to travel to the main computer brain.
That's genius.
CZ notes that back in the day, a standard round trip for a data packet might take 100 microseconds. By utilizing FPGA, they could shave that down to 20 microseconds.
That sounds incredibly tedious. But I want you to think about your own foundational career skills, whatever industry you're in. For CZ, this environment forged an absolute obsession with speed, efficiency, and function over flashiness.
He didn't care about a beautiful user interface.
No, he cared about making a matching engine that operated with frictionless speed. And here is the through line. This latency obsession became his ultimate superpower. It's the exact same architectural mindset that he would later use to build Binance's trading engine.
It is, but what's crucial to understand about this narrative is that even with this acquired superpower, he didn't immediately jump into building his own massive company. Which brings us to a major theme of his early career. The illusion of the genius founder who just magically builds a unicorn company straight out of college.
Yeah, because after that Tokyo company gets sold for $52 million just before the year 2000, CZ gets absolutely nothing.
Nothing.
He's just a self-described salaryman, a coder on the payroll. He literally watches the senior partners take the payout, run a flashy new office for their next venture, and subsequently fold that new business within a year with zero revenue.
It's a harsh first lesson in the realities of business. Past success doesn't guarantee future success, and renting a flashy office does not magically generate revenue.
Very true.
Following this, right around the time of the September 11th attacks, he takes a job in New York working for Bloomberg. He's still a salaryman. He performs well, gets promoted, and ends up managing a team of about 80 people across different regions.
And frankly, according to the interview, he hates it.
He does.
He deeply dislikes the transition from being an individual contributor writing code to managing corporate personnel disputes.
So by 2005, he decides he needs a massive change. He and 5 friends, 4 Caucasians and 1 Japanese colleague, decide to move to Shanghai to start a fintech IT company.
And CZ is the only one in the group who speaks Chinese.
Albeit rustily at that point, yes. He gets an 11% equity stake in this new venture, and the sheer naivete he admits to here is amazing.
What does she do?
He says he didn't even know the difference between preferred and common stock. He just blindly assumed the founders were splitting the remaining 60% of the company equally among the junior partners.
What?
And this lack of business experience leads to a colossal structural mistake.
Yeah.
Their grand idea was to build cutting-edge Wall Street-style trading technology and sell it to Chinese brokers and financial exchanges.
Sounds like a solid plan on paper.
So they move across the world to Shanghai, rent a very fancy office, repeating the exact mistake of his former Tokyo bosses, and only after setting up shop do they realize a massive legal hurdle.
What was it?
They had registered the business as a wholly foreign-owned enterprise, commonly known as a WFOE.
Which sounds like standard corporate paperwork. But in China at that time, what did being a WFOE actually mean for them?
It was a death sentence for their business model. Under Chinese regulations at the time, domestic financial institutions and state-backed brokers were legally barred from purchasing core infrastructure software from a wholly foreign-owned enterprise.
Because of security and regulatory concerns.
Exactly. Their entire target market, the very people they moved to China to sell to, was instantly legally inaccessible.
I mean, you move across the world, you burn cash, renting a fancy office, and boom, you literally cannot legally sell to your clients on day one.
Brutal.
Most people would just pack up, admit defeat, and go back to a safe corporate job in New York. But they didn't. They executed a massive, unglamorous pivot.
Since they had tech skills, they became a work-for-hire IT shop.
Yeah, they did whatever anyone would pay them to do to keep the lights on. If a large automotive company needed their SAP database systems implemented, they did it. If a client literally needed their office printers fixed, these high-frequency trading engineers fixed the printers.
The sheer grind of this period is what stands out. They spent 8 years doing this.
8 years.
8 years. They slowly built up a stable client base that included Shanghai General Motors and eventually foreign banks operating in Hong Kong, like Morgan Stanley and Deutsche Bank.
That's a slow climb.
Very slow. For the first few years, CZ mentions he didn't cash out a single penny of profit, constantly reinvesting all his modest savings back into the business just to keep it afloat. It was a grueling climb until the company was finally stable enough to pay the partners a comfortable 6-figure salary.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the reality of entrepreneurship for most people. It's not a lightning strike moment in a garage. It's fixing printers for years to make payroll until you find your footing.
Precisely. And by 2013, he's in his mid-30s. He's married, has kids enrolled in international schools, and is making a decent living as a junior partner in this IT firm. It's comfortable, it's safe, it's a good life.
And then the poker game happens.
Yes. This is a legendary piece of crypto lore. He is playing in a regular, low-stakes poker game in Shanghai. The table is a mix of struggling tech entrepreneurs and venture capitalists.
Okay.
One of the VCs, Ron Cao from Lightspeed Ventures, casually tells CZ he needs to look into this obscure digital currency called Bitcoin.
And this is 2013, so it's very early days.
Very early. The very next day, CZ follows up and has lunch with Bobby Lee, who was at that time stepping in to become the CEO of BTC China, one of the earliest crypto exchanges.
Right.
Bobby Lee tells CZ flat out, you need to put 10% of your net worth into Bitcoin. His reasoning was mathematical. There was a small chance it goes to zero, but a much higher probability it goes up 10x, effectively doubling his net worth.
And that lunch is the push CZ needed to actually go home and read the original Bitcoin white paper written by the pseudonymous Satoshi Nakamoto.
Yes.
And his reaction to it is so telling. It took him 6 months of reading it over and over to fully digest the implications. But what captivated him wasn't that it was some dense, impenetrable academic thesis. It was the exact opposite.
In the interview, both CZ and the hosts marvel at the elegance of Satoshi Nakamoto's writing. The Bitcoin white paper is only 9 pages long.
9 pages.
9 pages. It takes an enormous amount of intellectual mastery to distill a revolutionary, complex system combining cryptography, game theory, and distributed economics into 9 pages of non-technical prose that you could realistically hand to a layperson and have them grasp the core concepts.
It's incredible.
CZ immediately saw the elegance of that design. He realized this wasn't just a gimmick for buying things online, it was the most fundamental shift in technology he had seen since the advent of the internet itself.
He genuinely believed this was the biggest thing that would happen in his lifetime. And he realized that if he didn't jump in right then, at 36 years old, he might have to wait another 15 or 20 years for the next major technological wave to come along.
So he goes all in.
He tells his partners he's leaving the stable IT firm. And here's the leap that I find so hard to wrap my head around. He doesn't just put the suggested 10% of his net worth in. He decides to sell his family's apartment in Shanghai to buy Bitcoin.
It is a massive, almost incomprehensible escalation of risk. He sells the apartment for roughly $900,000.
Wow.
But real estate transactions take months to clear, so he moves his family into a rental in Tokyo while he starts traveling to network in the crypto space. As the payments for the apartment slowly come through in tranches, he immediately uses them to buy Bitcoin on the open market.
And what was the price at that time?
His first purchase is at $800, and as he's buying, the market is actively crashing. The price drops to $600, then down to $400, but he just keeps buying all the way down. He ultimately averaged out his cost basis to about $600 per coin.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here.
Mm-hmm.
Put yourself in his shoes, learner. You're in your mid-30s. You have kids, you leave a lucrative, stable partnership, you sell your family's home, move them into a rental, and bet nearly $1 million on a 9-page internet PDF.
Yeah.
Buying a highly experimental digital asset that is actively crashing in value while you purchase it. That doesn't sound like a brilliant optimizer. That sounds borderline reckless.
From the outside, it absolutely looks reckless. But we have to link this back to his foundational baseline. Because his baseline of happiness was set at $4.50 an hour flippin' burgers, his fear of ruin was remarkably low.
Right.
He knew that even if Bitcoin went to zero, he still had world-class coding skills. He could always get a job paying 6 figures. His family wouldn't starve. When your worst-case scenario is just returning to a comfortable upper-middle-class tech job, taking a massive swing on a high-conviction thesis becomes psychologically viable.
And he didn't even have a job lined up in the crypto industry yet. He was just traveling around, talking to early mining operators in Hangzhou, going to a tiny, sparsely attended 200-person Bitcoin conference in Las Vegas where he met early pioneers.
Right, he mentions meeting Vitalik Buterin there, who would later go on to create Ethereum. The entire industry at that point was just a handful of passionate people in small rooms. CZ was immersing himself entirely in the culture and the ecosystem before he even had a paycheck.
Which perfectly transitions us into the next phase of his career. Because again, the myth is that he just snaps his fingers, writes some code, and creates Binance, the world's biggest exchange.
Not even close.
But the reality is a meandering path of failing forward, repeatedly. First, he joins a company called blockchain.info as their head of development. He actually takes a pay cut from his previous IT firm just to be paid entirely in Bitcoin.
His time there is brief, only about 6 or 7 months, but it proves highly educational. Blockchain.info at the time was functioning mostly as a digital wallet and a block explorer, allowing people to look up transactions on the ledger.
Okay.
He witnessed extreme guerrilla marketing firsthand. At the time, blockchain.info had 2 million users, making it arguably the largest platform in the entire industry.
And how are they marketing it?
Their entire marketing strategy consisted of the founder, Ben Reeves, continuously replying to a single, massive 150-page thread on a niche forum called bitcointalk.org.
You're kidding.
No, that was it. CZ learned that in a nascent, highly engaged community, you don't need a Super Bowl ad budget if you know how to talk directly to your core users.
But he also learns what kind of company culture he absolutely does not want to be a part of. He details clashes with management, specifically when a new executive, Peter Smith, joined the company and maneuvered into the CEO role, essentially pushing the existing technical leadership aside.
Right.
CZ was uncomfortable with the politics, so he leaves. He then gets into a minor bidding war for his services between two major Chinese exchanges at the time, BTC China and OKCoin. He ultimately chooses OKCoin, joining as their chief technology officer.
But that stint doesn't last long either. He leaves OKCoin after about 8 months due to fundamental disagreements over business ethics and transparency.
What example?
Well, he mentions being deeply uncomfortable with how OKCoin ran promotional campaigns. They would publicly advertise a trading fee discount to everyone, but the fine print dictated that users actually had to manually contact customer support and ask for it to receive it.
Oh, that's incredibly frustrating.
It was designed so most people would forget or not bother. CZ hated that friction. He wanted a transparent, user-first approach, where if a discount is advertised, it is automatically applied by the software.
So it's 2015. He has now left two major crypto companies due to cultural and ethical clashes. He decides it is finally time to strike out on his own. He and two trusted developers decide they're going to build a brand new Bitcoin exchange in Japan to fill the massive vacuum left by the infamous Mt. Gox collapse.
We should quickly clarify what Mt. Gox was for context. Based in Tokyo, Mt. Gox was handling over 70% of all global Bitcoin transactions at its peak.
Massive.
But in early 2014, it suffered a catastrophic hack, losing hundreds of thousands of Bitcoins and went bankrupt. This devastated the market and left a massive gap for a reliable exchange in Japan.
So CZ sees this opening. And how do they build their prototype? They don't spend 6 months writing proprietary code from scratch. They literally find some open source exchange software floating around the internet, fork it.
Meaning they copy the code to build their own version.
Exactly. They copy it, tweak the user interface to make it look a bit sexier, and hook it up to a script that pulls live, real-time order book data from another exchange called Bitfinex.
They essentially built a ghost town and piped in fake traffic.
Yeah.
An order book is just the live list of all the buyers and sellers waiting to trade at different prices. By copying Bitfinex's data, CZ's demo looked like it was a highly active, bustling exchange with thousands of orders moving every second.
It's the classic Silicon Valley fake it till you make it minimum viable product.
Yeah.
They whipped this demo together in a matter of days.
But when CZ actually went to pitch this to investors in Japan, he wasn't just relying on a flashy fake front end. When the investors started grilling him with technical questions, he could draw on his deep background in Tokyo high-frequency trading to explain exactly how he would build the back-end in-memory matching engines to make it incredibly fast and scalable.
But the investors give him a harsh, very pragmatic reality check. They look at him and say, CZ, the tech is cool, the matching engine sounds great, but you cannot run a consumer retail exchange in Japan because you only speak taxi Japanese.
Taxi Japanese.
Phrases like, go left, go right, I'll take that sushi. You can't run a customer support team, negotiate local banking partnerships, or manage a Japanese marketing campaign with a tourist's vocabulary.
So faced with that wall, instead of giving up, he pivots again. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is a masterclass in reading the room. The investors pointed out that while existing Japanese exchanges had the language and cultural lock, their back-end technology was terrible. It was slow, buggy, and prone to crashing.
Yeah.
They suggested CZ should just build the engine and sell it to the locals. So literally 2 weeks later, he pivots from wanting to run a consumer exchange to launching an exchange-as-a-service B2B software model. He signs a contract with a Japanese exchange, charging them $360,000 for a perpetual license to his system, and demands a $180,000 down payment upfront. Just like that, he has enough cash flow to stop paying his developers out of his own shrinking personal savings.
And over the next 2 years, From roughly 2015 to early 2017, this B2B software business quietly thrives. They build a team of about 20 people and sign up 30 different exchange clients across Asia.
Every new client is a step up in recurring monthly maintenance revenue.
It is a fantastic, stable, money-printing business. He has finally found a comfortable, low-profile groove in the crypto world.
Until geopolitics forces his hand yet again.
Always does.
In March 2017, the Chinese government decides to initiate a crackdown on digital assets, specifically targeting the plethora of stamp, culture, and localized crypto exchanges that made up the bulk of CZ's client base.
So what happens to his business?
Because CZ's company is just the software vendor, the guys providing the picks and shovels, they aren't directly shut down by the government. But almost overnight, their clients are wiped out. The recurring revenue plummets to near zero.
They're forced to figure out a survival strategy or fire everyone. By May 2017, sitting in an office with a team of 20 highly skilled tech developers and 2 salespeople, they make a fateful decision. They already have world-class exchange software built. They know it's incredibly fast because they've been iterating on it for 2 years.
So why not just run it themselves?
Exactly. Why not customize it to be a pure crypto-to-crypto exchange, avoiding the regulatory nightmare of handling fiat currencies like dollars or yuan, and run it globally?
But to launch a global consumer exchange, you need serious marketing capital. They initially planned to go the traditional venture capital route, preparing pitch decks. But then, CZ witnesses the absolute madness of the 2017 initial coin offering, or ICO. Boom.
Now, for those who might have blocked the 2017 crypto craze out of their memory, an ICO was basically a way for startups to bypass VCs and raise money directly from the public by creating and selling their own custom digital tokens. And it was the Wild West.
It truly was. CZ recounts watching a founder in China raise $15 million in 10 days with nothing but a white paper and a basic website. There was no actual product, no code, just a promise.
Unbelievable.
CZ looks at this frenzy and thinks, I actually have a working, battle-tested product, and I have a solid reputation in the industry from my time at blockchain.info and OKCoin. If guy with a website can raise $15 million, I certainly can.
So on June 14, 2017, he tells his team to draft a white paper. They launch the ICO for their own token, the BNB token. They offer 60% of the total token supply to the public and successfully raise roughly $15 million in Bitcoin and Ethereum.
I want to highlight the tokenomics design here because it wasn't just a pointless meme coin. The core utility of the BNB token was brilliant in its simplicity.
How so?
The promise was, if you buy and hold this token in your account, you will receive a 50% discount on all your trading fees when the new Binance platform launches.
Oh, that's smart.
That mechanic created immediate, tangible, mathematical demand for the token among active day traders. It provided the initial liquidity and the guaranteed user base the exchange needed to survive the critical launch phase. They weren't just raising money, they were pre-acquiring their most loyal, high-volume customers.
So they have the $15 million war chest. They successfully launched the Binance exchange. The trading engine is humming. And then September 2017 rolls around. China drops the hammer a second time, and this time it's a kill shot.
Oh, yeah.
Multiple Chinese government departments issue a joint memo categorically banning all crypto exchanges from operating within the country and outlawing all ICOs.
This is an existential threat to a company that is barely 2 months old. A significant portion, around 30% of Binance's early user base and trading volume, was coming from mainland China.
But CZ calmly looks at the server data and realizes the inverse. 70% of their users are already international.
Right.
If they proactively cut off the Chinese market and geo-block those IP addresses, the remaining 70% is still enough to survive and grow. But they obviously cannot keep their servers and employees in Shanghai under a blanket ban. So CZ makes the call to pack up the entire 30-person company and relocate them back to Tokyo.
He literally moves the whole company across the sea.
Yeah.
It's wild to think about the logistics of that. He mentions in the interview that because the team was so young, he was the oldest guy there, nobody else had kids, barely anyone was married. It was a relatively easy physical move to execute quickly, though obviously emotionally taxing.
But I want to pause and ask you, the learner, to really think about this timeline. How many times would you have thrown in the towel?
Let's review the tape. His IT business in 2005 was legally blocked on day one by the WFOE regulations. His first 2 crypto jobs ended in cultural clashes. His first idea for an exchange in Japan was shot down by investors because of his language skills. And then, government crackdowns destroyed his business model, not once, but twice in the span of 6 months.
Binance's existence was literally forged by insurmountable obstacles. If the Chinese government hadn't shut down his B2B clients, he never would have launched a consumer exchange. If they hadn't banned ICOs, he might have stayed a regional player in Shanghai instead of being forced onto the global stage in Tokyo.
It is the textbook definition of anti-fragility. Every shock to the system forced a pivot that ultimately led to a larger, more resilient, and more scalable business model.
And when they finally launched Binance to the global market, the product market fit was undeniable. It wasn't just the BNB fee discount driving users, it was that decades-old latency obsession paying off.
Oh, absolutely. Anyone could see with their own eyes that placing an order on Binance was visibly significantly faster and smoother than using legacy competitors at the time like Poloniex or Bittrex, which frequently crashed during high volatility.
Which launches us into the next era of his life, scaling, SBF, and the realities of wealth. Because the rise of Binance from late 2017 into 2018 is just surreal.
Tell me about it.
A few months in, the CFO comes into CZ's office and tells him their revenue for the day was a couple hundred Bitcoin. CZ literally couldn't believe it. He made her go back and double and triple check the math because he thought they must be off by an entire decimal magnitude.
The token price was just as volatile. He recalls a 3-week period where the growth was so exponential it felt hallucinatory. Every time he went to sleep, the BNB token went up 20%. Every time he sat through a 1-hour meeting, it went up 20%. Every time he went to the bathroom, it was up 20%.
By early 2018, just 7 or 8 months after launching, they are officially the #1 crypto exchange in the world by trading volume. Forbes magazine comes calling and puts CZ on the cover. He mentions it was the first time in his life he ever had to wear makeup for a photo shoot.
But this brings us to a fascinating psychological profile of CZ as a newly minted, explosive billionaire. Unlike a 20-something Silicon Valley founder who hits it big and might immediately buy a fleet of Lamborghinis, buy a mega yacht, and throw massive parties, CZ was in his 40s.
He had life experience.
Exactly. He describes his personality as having a very narrow emotional amplitude. He doesn't get overly euphoric during the highs, and he doesn't get deeply depressed during the lows. Furthermore, he skipped the gradual steps of wealth accumulation. He went from being relatively okay financially, running a 30-person startup, directly to the cover of Forbes. He didn't have the time to develop the stereotypical habits of a millionaire before suddenly becoming a billionaire.
Here's where it gets really interesting. He talks about being a functional billionaire. Even after they were massively successful in generating insane revenue, when they were flying out of China to Japan during the relocation, he initially booked economy-class red-eye tickets for the entire executive team.
Just standard operating procedure for him.
Yeah, he thought that was normal, until his assistant gently pulled him aside and suggested that maybe, since they were running a billion-dollar company, they should upgrade to business class so they could actually sleep and function the next day.
His relationship with physical possessions is incredibly detached. Even today, with unfathomable wealth, he mentions he still lives in a second-hand older house where the living room roof legitimately leaks every month or so when it rains heavily.
And he just doesn't fix the whole roof.
He just doesn't care. He says, if it functions, I'm okay. We'll just fix it whenever it leaks. He has zero interest in glitz, style, or golden fixtures. He views his environment purely through the lens of utility.
And that functional, utility-driven mindset deeply informed his business philosophy. During the interview, when he's asked what his North Star metric was for Binance, but one number he looked at every day, he explicitly states it wasn't revenue, and it wasn't even trading volume. It was DAU, daily active users.
His philosophy is deeply rooted in tech fundamentals. A product is only valuable if people consistently want to use it. If you optimize your exchange purely for short-term revenue, maybe by jacking up withdrawal fees or forcing users into predatory trades, you might have a great quarter, but you will lose long-term growth as users flee to competitors.
Right.
But if you have hundreds of millions of people choosing to use your platform every single day, you are inherently creating immense intrinsic value for the world. And if you have that user base, the revenue will naturally follow.
But of course, when you build the biggest honeypot in the world, you attract massive competition. Enter Sam Bankman-Fried, or SBF, and his exchange, FTX. The dynamic between CZ and SBF is a crucial piece of financial history.
It's infamous at this point.
They first crossed paths in January 2019 at a massive Binance-hosted conference in Singapore. SBF is running a quantitative trading firm called Alameda Research at the time, and they throw a wild, ostentatious after-party at an aquarium on Sentosa Island, complete with scuba divers swimming around inside the fish tanks holding signs.
At this point, the power dynamic is heavily skewed. SBF's team were just VIP algorithmic traders operating on Binance's platform. They were clients. But SBF was highly ambitious. A few months after that party, SBF approaches CZ with a bold proposal for a joint venture to build a brand new cryptocurrency futures trading platform.
And what was the split SBF proposed?
SBF proposes a 60-40 equity split in his own favor.
Wow.
CZ declines that offer, reasoning quite logically that Binance had millions of users and global reach, while FTX had essentially nothing but a pitch deck at that point.
But SBF doesn't take no for an answer easily. He comes back a few more times, and finally, in November 2019, FTX actually launches and starts gaining some real traction in the market. They offer Binance a very attractive revised deal to buy a 20% equity stake in FTX.
And this investment primarily involved a swap of Binance's BNB tokens for FTX's proprietary FTT tokens.
CZ agrees, viewing it as a standard strategic investment in a rising competitor. But almost immediately, the relationship turns incredibly toxic.
The culture clash is immediate. CZ starts hearing from multiple independent sources that SBF is actively bad-mouthing Binance in Washington, D.C. political circles, trying to paint Binance as a shady offshore entity, while positioning FTX as the regulatory darling.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, FTX starts aggressively, relentlessly poaching Binance's staff. They specifically target Binance's VIP account managers.
And why target the account managers? Because they hold the keys to the kingdom. They have direct relationships with the whales, the traders moving tens of millions of dollars a day.
Exactly. FTX was offering these managers up to 5 times their current salaries to jump ship, and the pattern was blatant. The day after an employee left Binance for FTX, Binance's top-tier clients would suddenly start getting phone calls offering them better, heavily subsidized trading rates to move their liquidity over to FTX.
It's just blatant, aggressive hostility towards your own lead investor. CZ actually calls Sam on the phone and says, "Can you please stop doing this? We are your shareholders. We want you to succeed. We want to help you." But the bad-mouthing and the poaching continue unabated.
Finally, by mid-2021, CZ has had enough of the drama. FTX is currently out raising money at a massive $32 billion valuation. Binance, as an early investor, actually held a standard venture capital veto rights clause that they could have used to legally block FTX's future funding rounds and cause immense pain for SBF.
But CZ didn't even want the headache of a protracted legal or board fight. He acted as an incredibly passive, detached investor. He mentions in the interview that he never even asked to see FTX's internal financial statements or balance sheets because he didn't want to get tangled up in their internal workings or be accused of stealing trade secrets.
He just utilized his veto position as leverage to negotiate a clean, full exit. In July 2021, Binance completely divested its equity from FTX, taking a massive payout.
And the timing of that is historic. This was a full year and a half before FTX completely collapsed into bankruptcy in late 2022, revealing one of the biggest multi-billion-dollar financial frauds in modern history.
SBF goes to prison.
Right. And CZ walked away just in time, completely unscathed financially, purely because he was tired of dealing with the interpersonal toxicity and the drama.
It's a testament to that narrow emotional amplitude. He didn't let ego drive him into a destructive war of attrition with SBF. He just calmly took his chips off the table and walked away.
But walking away from SBF didn't mean walking away from trouble. Which brings us to the heaviest chapter of this story: the Department of Justice, the plea deal, and federal prison.
Now, we should make it incredibly clear right now.
Yes, absolutely. We are strictly reporting CZ's perspective from the source material. We are maintaining absolute political neutrality here regarding the Biden administration, the DOJ, Senator Warren, the Trump administration, all of it.
We're just looking at the timeline of events as laid out by CZ in the interview.
Exactly. So, looking strictly at how CZ described the events, we're going to walk through his experience with the U.S. legal system.
According to CZ's account, as Binance grew to dominate global crypto trading, they inevitably attracted the attention of U.S. law enforcement. He notes the first real inkling of this came on New Year's Eve 2017, when Homeland Security reached out asking for Binance's help in tracking hackers who had moved stolen funds through the platform.
So it started cooperatively.
Yes. By 2019, anticipating that U.S. regulatory scrutiny was going to intensify, Binance launched a completely separate, heavily regulated entity called Binance.US to serve American clients. However, starting around 2021 and intensifying massively into 2022 and 2023, the Department of Justice took an aggressively hostile stance against the broader crypto industry, culminating in intense multi-agency legal pressure on Binance globally.
CZ's legal team Dealing with this unprecedented hostility, engaged in months of grueling, high-stakes negotiations. To understand what actually happened, we need to break down the specific legal charges according to CZ's layman understanding of the case against him.
Let's unpack the layers of the government's accusations. Layer 1 was a Bank Secrecy Act violation. Essentially, this is a failure to properly register. The government argued that Binance was servicing U.S.-based users, but had failed to register with the Treasury Department as a formal money services business.
Okay, that's layer 1.
Layer 2 involved allegations of weak KYC, know your customer, and AML, anti-money laundering procedures. The argument was that while Binance had systems in place, they weren't robust or strict enough to catch all bad actors attempting to use the platform.
Got it.
During negotiations, CZ was willing to concede and plead guilty to these first two layers, accepting corporate responsibility. He noted that, historically, his legal team could find no precedent of anyone in U.S. history ever being sent to federal prison solely for these specific, standalone corporate regulatory charges.
But the DOJ wasn't stopping at corporate fines. They wanted individual accountability. They tried to add what CZ describes as Layer 3 and Layer 4 enhancements to the charges. These enhancements alleged that CZ had personally known about, directed, and actively facilitated illicit transactions for specific bad actors.
However, according to CZ's recount of the negotiations, the DOJ could not provide any specific documentary evidence, emails, or point to any single transaction that he personally handled or approved to support these severe enhancements. Ultimately, the court outright rejected these Layer 3 and 4 additions due to lack of evidence, but getting the government to drop them was an agonizing process of psychological warfare.
The DOJ utilized a negotiation tactic that CZ refers to as the two-week silence. During the back and forth, if CZ and his high-priced lawyers refused a specific term or pushed back on an enhancement, the DOJ prosecutors wouldn't argue. They wouldn't yell. They would just go completely silent for exactly 2 weeks. For those 14 days, CZ was living in absolute purgatory.
It is a highly calculated mental pressure tactic. For 2 weeks, CZ didn't know if negotiations had permanently broken down. He didn't know if a sealed Interpol Red Notice indictment was waiting for him at any international border crossing. He didn't know if he would ever be able to travel safely to see his family again.
That's agonizing.
As CZ noted, the government negotiators do this every single day. They know that 2 weeks is the optimal time to let paranoia and anxiety fully set in. Any longer, and the target might just get used to the new reality and refuse to negotiate further. Any shorter, and the panic hasn't fully cooked.
Eventually, the pressure tactic yields a compromise. CZ agrees to a plea deal based strictly on the first 2 layers of charges, the failure to register and the weak compliance program. He willingly flies to the U.S., stays in a hotel in Seattle, and begins the formal court process.
Based on historical precedent for those specific charges, he and his legal team expect a relatively standard outcome for a first-time, non-violent corporate offender. Perhaps a massive fine, probation, or at worst, a period of home confinement.
But then, just days before his sentencing in April 2024, the political landscape shifts dramatically.
The environment becomes highly charged. Senator Elizabeth Warren writes a public open letter to the DOJ demanding strict, maximum punishment for CZ, framing it within a broader political narrative against cryptocurrency. Then, the DOJ submits their formal sentencing request to the judge.
And what do they ask for?
They don't ask for the standard sentencing guidelines. They ask for 36 months in federal prison, which was double the maximum end of the standard sentencing guidelines for the specific crimes he pled guilty to.
Wow, double.
CZ's defense lawyers were stunned. They told him they had rarely seen the government ask a court to flat-out ignore the established sentencing guidelines so aggressively in a case like this.
The judge ultimately acts as a moderating force. He splits the difference, sentencing CZ to 4 months in federal prison. But the judge adds a highly unique, very telling clause to the sentencing documentation. CZ is explicitly declared not to be a flight risk and not to be a danger to society in any way. Therefore, the judge orders that he requires absolutely no post-release supervision, no probation, and no parole.
The judge basically said, do your 4 months, and then you are completely 100% free to go anywhere in the world.
So, CZ prepares to enter the vast, incredibly complex U.S. prison system, a system that currently houses over 2 million people. Now, typically, non-violent, white-collar billionaire offenders are sent to minimum security federal camps. The place is often derisively referred to as Club Fed, which have no fences and relatively relaxed rules.
But because CZ is a Canadian citizen, a non-U.S. citizen, bureaucratic rules dictate he is ineligible for the camp system. Instead, he is sent to a low-security federal prison in California, which is heavily populated by people serving time for serious drug offenses and weapons charges.
He is terrified. He hires prison consultants, former guards and former inmates who coach him on survival. They tell him to keep his head down, don't make eye contact, don't talk to anyone, and under no circumstances should he join any gangs.
But when he actually walks through the gates, the reality inside is completely different than the movies.
How so?
The very first guard he meets during intake looks at him and says, "You're going to need protection. I hear the Pacific Islanders are hiring right now."
CZ is absolutely baffled. A guard is telling him to join a gang.
What he quickly discovers is the deeply ingrained, unwritten sociological structure of the California prison system. To minimize chaos and violence in an overcrowded environment, both the inmates and the guards passively accept a system where the population actively organizes itself into distinct groups or cars based strictly on ethnicity. Whites roll with whites, blacks with blacks, Hispanics with Hispanics.
And for CZ,
Because there aren't many Asians in the federal system, they are grouped together with Native Americans and Pacific Islanders into one car.
and it operates almost like a highly structured labor union, not a chaotic street gang. If there's a dispute over a phone or a disrespect issue between individuals from different ethnic groups, they don't just start a riot. The union reps from each car meet up in the yard, discuss the grievance, and negotiate a stand-down or an agreed-upon resolution.
So on his first day in the yard, a Filipino-German inmate named Chino approaches him and says, "Welcome to our car. Here are the rules." CZ goes from being a multi-billionaire CEO running a global financial empire to being a protected, dues-paying member of a six-man prison faction overnight.
He spends his 4 months there, adapting to this bizarre new baseline. He keeps his head down, reads books, does push-ups, and actually spends time drafting a book on a rudimentary, heavily monitored Prism computer terminal. But his release is what really highlights the absolute deprivation of the experience.
Yeah, when he finally gets out in late September 2024, the things that strike him most aren't access to his bank accounts or seeing his stock portfolio.
Right.
It's the simple, visceral luxury of taking a shower in a normal stall where he doesn't have to constantly touch the walls to keep his balance. And it's seeing a plate of fresh, whole fruit. He had been completely denied fresh fruit for months, living on a prison diet of heavy carbs, processed meats, and fried food.
It connects right back to that leaky roof mentality. His baseline was reset once again. When you have been deprived of basic autonomy and fresh food, the glossy, superficial trappings of billionaire life matter even less than they did before.
Very true.
He flies back to his home in the UAE just 26 minutes after walking out the prison doors. And while he is adjusting to life post-prison, reconnecting with his family, another massive curveball comes his way. Which brings us to our final major chapter: pardons, Giggle Academy, and the AI future.
This is the unexpected denouement of the legal saga. Shortly after his release, CZ received a full, absolute presidential pardon from President Biden.
A full pardon.
Now, the pardon process itself is notoriously opaque. There's no official checklist or public hearing. CZ's lawyers submitted a massive petition outlining his case, citing the unprecedented nature of his prosecution and the deviation from sentencing guidelines, and routed it through a pardon czar in the White House named Alice Johnson.
Who was herself a former inmate who was famously pardoned years earlier.
Exactly. CZ suspects there were significant geopolitical and practical economic reasons at play, perhaps aided by the shifting political winds of the incoming administration. On a purely practical level, if the United States wants to position itself as the global regulated capital of cryptocurrency moving forward, it is incredibly difficult to achieve that if the ultimate beneficial owner, the UBO of the world's largest exchange, is legally restricted from operating freely or visiting the country.
Makes total sense.
The pardon essentially wipes the slate clean, removing the legal taint and allowing Binance to find proper regulated legal footing in the U.S. ecosystem.
With the pardon secured and his freedom guaranteed, CZ faces a new reality. As part of his original plea deal, he had officially stepped down from his role as CEO, relinquishing control of the company he built from scratch. He admits in the interview that he cried when he had to let it go. It was his baby.
But with the benefit of hindsight, he now sees it as an incredible blessing. It frees up his mental bandwidth for a completely new mission, a project he calls Giggle Academy.
This is an incredible pivot from high finance. CZ looks at the macro global data and sees a massive inefficiency. There are roughly 700 to 800 million illiterate adults in the world, two-thirds of them women. On top of that, there are another 500 million children with zero access to formal schooling.
That is 1.2 billion people, over 10% of the entire global population, completely locked out of basic education.
To solve this, he isn't trying to build physical brick-and-mortar schools or train thousands of teachers. That doesn't scale. He believes that with current advancements in AI tutors, gamification, and psychological app design, a single piece of software on a cheap $50 Android smartphone can deliver comprehensive, highly engaging, free education to anyone, anywhere in the world.
He is completely deficit financing this massive project himself, supplemented recently by an organic $12 million donation from a community built around a meme coin.
Now, I have to ask the obvious question here. He's the king of crypto. Why not use crypto for this? It seems so incredibly obvious to implement a learn-to-earn token system to incentivize these students in developing nations. Give them a digital badge that pays out a fraction of a crypto token every time they finish a math module or learn to read a new sentence.
CZ deeply considered that exact model, but ultimately made a hard, non-negotiable rule. There is no token.
No token at all.
None. And this raises an important question. Why no token? His reasoning reveals a profound, hard-won understanding of human incentive structures. If you attach a financial token with real-world value to an educational platform, it instantly mutates the ecosystem.
You change the motivation entirely.
You immediately invite speculators who just want to trade the token on exchanges, and more dangerously, you invite click farms who will build bots to game the app, speedrunning the math modules just to harvest the financial rewards. The core mission of genuine, distraction-free education would be completely overwhelmed and destroyed by financial speculation.
It shows a real maturity. He's a crypto billionaire, intentionally refusing to use crypto because he knows, from brutal experience, that it's the wrong tool for this specific job. But that doesn't mean he has lost faith in the industry. In fact, he is still incredibly bullish on crypto's future, specifically regarding how it intersects with his third major technological wave, artificial intelligence.
This is perhaps his most provocative thesis in the entire interview. CZ predicts that in the near future, the primary users of cryptocurrency networks will not be human beings trading meme coins. The primary users will be AI agents.
Really think about a world where you, the learner, have dozens of personalized bots running in the background of your life. One bot booking your flights, one bot trading stocks based on your parameters, one bot paying microcents for research articles to compile a report for your job.
These bots are going to be making thousands of microtransactions every single second. And here is the fundamental friction point. An AI bot cannot walk into a Chase Bank branch with a driver's license to pass a KYC background check. Traditional banking infrastructure simply cannot onboard a piece of autonomous software as a legal customer. Furthermore, the legacy SWIFT network and traditional credit card rails literally cannot handle the sheer transaction volume and the microscopic fee structures that millions of AI agents will generate.
Therefore, crypto becomes the native, machine-readable financial rail for the entire AI economy. Blockchain ledgers and smart contracts are perfectly designed for autonomous software to interact, verify trust mathematically, and exchange value instantly, borderlessly, and without traditional banking bottlenecks slowing them down. Humans might step away from the blockchain, but the machines will adopt it entirely.
It is a wild yet highly logical vision of the future.
Which brings us to the end of this journey. We've covered a staggering amount of ground today, from flipping burgers on a minimum wage grill in Vancouver to the highest peaks of global wealth, through the terrifying valleys of federal prison, and out into a future driven by AI educators. Through it all, CZ synthesizes his entire life philosophy into what he calls the spiderweb graph of happiness.
It's a powerful visualization. He argues that money is just one single thread on this web. Once you have enough to secure basic shelter and food, once you are past the 415-hour stage, pulling harder and harder on the money thread doesn't actually make the web any stronger, it just distorts it.
It throws the whole thing out of balance.
To have a resilient, genuinely happy life, you need to actively pull on the other threads. Your physical health, your control over your own time, the well-being of your family, and crucially, your mental stability.
CZ believes his real secret weapon throughout this entire saga wasn't his coding skills, and it wasn't his ability to time the Bitcoin market. It was his ability to strictly moderate his emotional amplitude. Never getting too euphoric during the billionaire highs, and never falling to pieces during the terrifying lows of WFOE blunders or DOJ indictments.
So what does this all mean for you?
Whether you're trying to build a tech startup, navigate a crazy, unforeseen career pivot, or just trying to survive a really tough week, remember that success is rarely a straight line drawn on a whiteboard. It's about optimizing what you can control, ruthlessly ignoring the flashy stuff like leaky roofs or Forbes covers, and simply having the grit to survive the pivots.
And I want to leave you with one final, highly provocative thought to mull over, building directly on CZ's vision of the AI future.
Okay, let's hear it.
CZ pointed out that Bitcoin's biggest flaw right now, especially for institutional use, is a lack of privacy. The ledger is entirely public. Now, as we move into a world where AI agents are executing thousands of microtransactions on our behalf every single minute, paying for our media, our travel, our groceries, the public, fully traceable nature of most blockchains becomes a massive physical and digital security risk.
Wow, yeah.
If anyone with an internet connection can see exactly what your AI is buying and where it is routing physical goods, your entire life is an open book to bad actors. Will the next trillion-dollar crypto innovation not be about transaction speed or lower fees, but about absolute, unbreakable anonymity for machine-to-machine payments? Something to think about next time you make a seamless digital payment.
That is a massive question for the next era of the internet. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive learner. We hope you walk away with a few fresh perspectives to take into your own journey. We'll catch you on the next one.